Well, welcome today to the final week in this series, Under Pressure. And today I want to talk to you about the last remaining area where we want to talk about finding margin, and that's where we spend most of our time at work. I'm sure you could already guess that from the movie clip we just saw. I want to talk to you over the next few minutes about how to take the principles we've been learning over the last few weeks from our schedules and our finances. And last week we talked about how to make sure we raise kids that are relationally rich and not just rich in experiences. Today I want to talk to you about how to apply those principles and find margin at work, where we can restructure and reorganize our thoughts about work in a way that we can get more done with less stress and potentially even make more money. I think that's what everybody wants. And hopefully I haven't done what we speakers often do, which is overpromise and underdeliver. I think that what I share with you today, this principle that we're going to find from the Bible, I think potentially has the opportunity to do that for you. Now, if you're like most of us in our work, we wind up doing more and more, and it consumes the majority of our time. Most of us spend more time at work than we do any other activity, and we get under more and more pressure, which leads to less and less emotional margin, which we then wind up taking home with us, which creeps into our margin there. And we have less to give to the people that we really care about. That's why we went to the work in the first place. And it winds up putting our whole life under tremendous amounts of pressure. And when we have no emotional margin because we've done so much at work, again, it just affects everything in our world around us, and yet we work harder and we do more, and yet it doesn't seem like we get rewarded commensurate with the amount of work that we're putting in. And there are a lot of things that I could talk about when it comes to this whole idea of margin and work, but what we're going to look at is just one principle. This is found in the Bible, in the Old Testament of the Bible, as you might imagine, since we're at a church. And let me just tell you up front, I know that as you're listening to this, because when I first heard this taught years and years ago, you're going to be tempted to think to yourself, there's just going to be something in you that's really going to want to say, yeah, well, if I were doing what you were doing, I probably could put that into place. And if I owned the company, then I could probably do that. Or if we had a bigger company, I could do that. Or if I worked in a certain department at my company, I could do that. But in my area, what you're talking about, while it may be good, it just doesn't apply to me, and I can't do it. Now, what I want you to have in mind as you listen to this talk today is, already, I know that that's the feeling that you're going to have, and what I want you to have in mind is, Ed's not trying to give us something that we can go and do today. It's not even something what I'm trying to do for you in this talk is, I want to paint a picture for you. I want to try to give you a bullseye on a target, because many of us, we started working where we're young, and nobody really told us, you just have to work. That's what they told us, and you went to work. But nobody really gave you the bullseye on the target for what work ought to look like, what it could and should be. And what I want to talk to you about today is something I know that for most of you, as you hear it, because of your work situation, you can't go home and implement this today because of a bunch of situations. You may not be able to implement it in a month or a year. You might not be able to implement it in your present situation. What I want you to get as you listen to me talk about this today is, I want you to get a picture of what could and should be. I want you to get a picture of what would margin look like if you could do it, and so that you would just have a portrait of what you should be shooting for at some point in your life. So again, I want to show you this principle. It comes from the Bible, and I believe God gave us this principle because it fits in line with the way we're made. In fact, you don't even have to believe the Bible, that I think you're going to see that it's the way that we're all created, and that this principle flows right out of that, and it flows into our work. And the first time we see this principle really at work, where it's just highlighted so clearly in the Bible, is in the life of a guy named Moses. Now, we've taught about Moses over the last year or so several times, but if you haven't heard that, let me sort of catch you up where we are. God creates the world, and it gets off track. Human beings mess up as God tries to be in a relationship with them, and God then takes it on himself to reestablish relationship. And he says, I'm going to go about reestablishing a relationship with all of humanity, but I'm going to start with one man, and through that one man, through his descendants, I'll build one nation, and through that nation, I'll redeem the whole world. Well, the nation's called Israel, and through Israel, God's going to redeem the world. And where we find ourselves in the timeline, this is thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, in the timeline of the history of the nation of Israel, they're not really even a nation yet. I mean, they were a family, and then they became a bigger kind of clan, and while they're in that bigger kind of clan, just a dad with his 12 sons, they get moved to a country because of a famine. They go to Egypt, and while they're in Egypt, eventually they wind up in slavery. And while they're in slavery, they grow to nation size, but they're held in slavery for hundreds of years, and now there are hundreds of thousands of them, but they're not a nation. They're just a bunch of slaves in the place of Egypt. So God chooses one of them, and through a bunch of miraculous events, a guy named Moses gets sent by God to go to the king in Egypt. The king, they called him, his title was Pharaoh. So Moses is sent by God to go to Pharaoh and say, hey, let my people go. It's time for them to go to be out of slavery. And Pharaoh, of course, says, no, I'm not letting my free labor force go. And God and Moses say yes, and Pharaoh says no, and they say yes, and he says no. And through, again, a whole bunch of miraculous kind of things that we don't have time to talk about today, eventually the king relents. God wins, as you might imagine, if he's really God, he wins. So now Moses has this whole hundreds of thousands, some people believe maybe as many even as 1 million former slaves, and he's leading them. Now, it's really hard for us to imagine because we don't really have anything comparable to it, but I just want you, I think you can imagine it. Get your mind around the fact that here's a group of people, they've never been anything but slaves. Their mom and daddy were slaves. Their grandma and grandpa, for hundreds of years, they've just been slaves. They don't have a government. They don't have any laws. They don't have any rules. For their whole life, and in everybody's life that they know, somebody has told them what to do, when to do it, how to do it, where to sleep, where to go, all of that. Somebody's taking care of that. And now Moses is leading them. And all they really have is they don't have law. They have God. They have Moses. And that's it. They've got all of that going on. And they've never done any of this kind of thing. And so now Moses is leading them, and months in a journey where God miraculously leads them, they finally come to a place called Mount Sinai. And on that mountain, God gives them the law, the 10 Commandments, and from that point on, they begin to try to figure this out. Moses has to tell them how to live out these laws. So while they're at Mount Sinai, Moses' father-in-law comes to visit him. Now, Moses' father-in-law is not of the tribe of Israel. Moses married outside of his race. There's some trouble earlier in his life, and he has to run away from his people, and he goes to this one land. And his father-in-law is a guy named Jethro, and he takes him in, and he lets him marry one of his daughters, and he gives him a job, and he helps Moses in a bad time get back on his feet. And then Moses, gets sent by God, and he waves bye-bye. But imagine his father-in-law who hears all that goes on. I mean, his son-in-law has gone, and he's beat the world's most powerful king, and he's leading this whole tribe. And so, this brand new nation, and Moses is the leader. His father-in-law is proud. So imagine, here comes this guy, Jethro, that's his father-in-law. He comes down to see his daughter and to see his grandchildren. And Moses comes home one day from work, and there's Grandpa sitting over there, Grandpa Jethro, and he's playing with the kids. And the next morning, after they've spent all night getting back acquainted with each other, Jethro says to him, Moses, I want to go to work with you. I want to see what you do. That's where I want to start reading to you in this encounter. The next day, Moses took his seat to serve as judge for the people, and they stood around him from morning till evening. So Moses' work day looks sort of like this. He gets up early, he goes to where the people are, he sits down in a chair, and all day long people come to him one after another. I mean, as far as the eye can see, there's this line of people coming to him, and they're asking him for counsel and to judge between disputes and to settle these quarrels among them. Every day, that's what he does. Now, I don't know about you, but that's about as clear a description of hell as I can imagine. I can't imagine having day after day of these people going, Moses, this is my cow, but she says it's her cow. No, that's my cow. Moses, my son won't do his homework. Tell him he's got to do his homework. Day after day. I mean, it just sounds horrible. Verse 14. When his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, what is this you're doing for the people? Why? In other words, I'm so proud of you and all that you've accomplished, but what in the world are you doing? Why do you alone sit as judge while all of these people stand around you from morning to evening? I mean, he's just appalled. Here's the great and mighty Moses who defeated the king of Egypt, and every day he settled a dispute over cattle and property and mom and daughter and talking to people all day long. And Jethro's like, what? You got to be kidding me. That's what you do every day? So Moses hears his father-in-law and he pushes back a little bit. Moses answered him, because the people come to me to seek God's will. In other words, I get this, but this is a God thing. I'm not saying I like it either, but God called me to do this because the people come to me to seek God's will. Whenever they have a dispute, it's brought to me. And I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees and instruction, because these people haven't had any law. Somebody's always told them what to do, and now I'm the one. I'm the one that tells them what to do. So Moses says to Jethro, look, you ask me why. Look, I'm sitting here every day because this is God's will. God called me to this. And Jethro's thinking to himself, well, it might be God's will, but that ain't the way God would do it. Now, this gets at something, that this little dilemma this gets at a dilemma that you find yourself in. See, when you went to work, or when you started the company, or when you got in your current position, or when they promoted you, or wherever you are in your position, it was necessary and it's normal that when you go to that new thing and you start that new thing or you do it, that you just have this attitude. Most of us do. I mean, we go in and say, hey, I'm going to show them that they're right. I'm going to go in, I'm going to do whatever's necessary, I'm going to work as hard as I can, and I'm going to prove to them they were right to give me that promotion. They were right to give me that position. I'm a leader. I'm going to make this job work. This is my company, and I'm the one that's going to make this work, and so I'm going to do whatever is necessary. I want people to look at me and say, wow, she is so capable. He's smarter. I mean, look at all that he can do. I want people to look at me and go, well, we can trust them with more responsibility. So it's natural, and often it's even necessary, that we try to do whatever it is that comes our way, because we want everybody that we work with to know, look, there's nothing beneath me. There's nothing that I want to do. I want to make this thing successful. I want people to know that I'm a hard worker, so I come in early. I stay late. If they ask me I help, I try to help with everything. It's also necessary because some of you know what I know, because I've done this in my time. You start the whole thing when you own the company, or you start the whole company. There's nobody else to do it. I mean, you have to turn on the lights and change the light bulbs. You have to take out the trash. You have to do everything, not because you want to do it, but there isn't anybody else to do it. But what begins as natural and necessary when we go into a position is, if you continue to do that forever, eventually you hurt your own productivity. And if you you just continue to do everything that comes your way. You take every opportunity that somebody lays before you. You do everything that you're asked to do. Ultimately, you undermine your ability to do what you started the company to do. You undermine your ability to do what they hired you to do. You undermine the opportunity you had to do what they promoted you, the task they gave you to do. And your overall productivity goes down as you do more and more. And over time, what happens is it causes the people around you to look at you and think, wow, she's not quite as capable as we thought she is. I guess maybe we didn't get as good a winner as we thought. He's just not quite as good as we thought. That's when we need to take a step back, and we need to hear the advice that Moses' father-in-law is about to give him, and we need to bring it into our world. Because there are a couple of things that I know about you and me, and they're just true about all of us. One is that you're only good at a couple of things. You're okay at a bunch of things, and there are a lot of things that you can do, but there are a couple of things that you're really good, but you're only really good at a couple of things. You're not good at everything. None of us are. And when you do the couple of things, when you work in that area where you're really good at, when you do the things that I like to say, when you're in your groove and you're doing the thing that just comes so easy and natural to you, people are amazed when you do it, and they say, "Man, how do you do that? I mean, it just seems to come so easy for you. How does that happen? I mean, you're awesome at that." And the answer is, I don't know. It just comes natural for me. It just isn't that hard for me, even though, maybe you have to work at it. But when you do the thing that you're built to do, and there's a couple of things that you're really good at, when you're in your groove, it's natural, and people are amazed at how well you do it. But you aren't really good at everything. I mean, none of us are. There are one or two or three things that you're really, really good at, and even though you get asked to do lots of things, you're not good at everything. You're just good at these one or two things. The other thing I know is that there are only one or two things that you do that really make an overall difference in your company or in your job or in the place where you work. There are only one or two things with the ministry you're part of. There are only one or two things in the company. There are only one or two things that really add to the bottom line. What I mean by that is there are a lot of things that get pushed to you and that people say, "Hey, would you help me with this? Can you do this? Can you be the one to go get training for this?" Lots of things get shoved at you, and you agree to do them, and they need to be done. But there are only one or two of those 8 or 10 things that you do that actually add to the bottom line. Again, what I mean by that is if the 8 things didn't get done, if you did those 2 things really, really well that add to the bottom line of your company, then you'd be a winner in your organization and you'd become indispensable to that. 10 or 11 things that are asked to do, they don't really add as much to the bottom line in the effectiveness of the mission of what you're trying to accomplish in your company as the 1 or 2 things that really do. And again, I remind you, you're only good at 1 or 2 things. When you can marry the 1 or 2 things that you're really good at, that you're in the groove when you do them, when you can marry those 1 or 2 things that you just feel like this is what I'm made to do, when you can marry those 1 or 2 things that you're good at with the 1 or 2 things that your company need to have done to make a difference, you'll enjoy doing them, you'll have less pressure, and you'll be more productive. When you can marry the 1 or 2 things that you're really good at with those 1 or 2 things that really need to be done, you'll enjoy them more, you'll get more done, and you'll feel less pressure. And again, I remind you, I know this isn't something you can do today. Remember, I'm not saying for you to go out today and say, "Hey, this is all I'm good at, this is what needs to be done." This isn't something maybe you can do today. All of us have things that get asked of us to do. All of them are things that probably need to be done. I'm just saying, there's only 1 or 2 of those things that actually add to the bottom line. And the 1 or 2 things that really suit you in the way that God made you, those are the things that when you do them, you really feel like you come alive and you do them really well. What I'm asking you is, what are those things? Well, what is that makes you feel alive? It's because God made you that way, and when you can marry those 2 things that make you feel like you're good at it with a particular responsibility of what needs to take place in your workplace, your organization, the mission that you're trying to accomplish, then you do your best. It causes you less stress, and you have more margin. Now, I get it. There's something in you that when you're listening to that, you go, "Well, I get that, but I can't do that." That's okay. Remember, I told you up front, I'm not asking you, I'm trying to paint a picture for you. Remember, I already said you can't do this today, maybe even this month, maybe not in a year, maybe not even this place or important. You say, "Well, but I don't own the company." Well, that's okay. Or you say, "I do own the company, but we're not a big enough company for me just to do the 1 or 2 things." I get that. I get it. I'm trying to create a new category. I'm trying to paint a different picture for you. I'm trying to give you what could and what should be. And when you're able to get to a place that you can figure that out and you get where you can move toward it, you'll create more margin in your work, and the pressure will go down, and your emotional energy will go up. The story of Moses and his father-in-law goes on, and Moses tells him, "Hey, this is just God's will." But the interesting thing is, Moses' father-in-law cares enough about him that he just won't take God's will as an answer. Verse 17. Moses' father-in-law replied, "What you're doing is not good." Now that's a shot, isn't it? I mean, here's a guy that shows up every day and he sits in this chair, and people come as far as the eye can see, and he settles their disputes. And I'm doing it every day. And now my father-in-law comes and watches me for a little bit and says, well, what you're doing, it just isn't very good. He goes on to say, this isn't good. You and these people who come to you will wear yourself out. Now, isn't that the way that your work feels some days? You show up and you work hard and you stay busy and you do everything you can, and you're just exhausted mentally and emotionally when you get home. And if somebody were to ask you, hey, what did you accomplish today? You go, I was busy, but I don't know if I did anything. I don't know if we moved anything. This work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. Listen to me now, and I will give you some advice, and may God be with you. Now, I just want you to imagine this because, and I think we can, because all of us have egos, and all of us, most of us are even willing to admit that we have a bigger ego maybe than we should. I want you to imagine what it would be like. You're Moses. I mean, this is Moses. Moses is a big deal. Moses went against the most powerful king in the world, and he kicked it. I mean, Moses won. Moses took a stick when God told him. He held it up over a sea, and the waters parted. People, I mean, Moses is just drenched in God. Moses went up to a mountain, met face to face with God, and God gave him the law that still affects our world today, that many of our laws are based on. Moses is a big deal. And his father-in-law, Jethro, comes to him. You know what Jethro's resume is? You know what he's done his whole life? Jethro's a shepherd. I mean, that's what he's done his whole time. And after one day of watching Moses work, he goes, hey, let me tell you, what you're doing and how you're doing it, it's not very good. Put that in your world. How's that going to go if somebody comes to you like that? Now see, I don't have to imagine this, because in my life, in my world, where I show up and I'm with a whole bunch of all you, and people are regularly reminding me, hey, Ed, some of us got real jobs. I got a real job. I work out in the real world. And some of you, I mean, men, particularly men, come and they run things, and they think they can run the church better than me. Maybe they can. Many of you just think it, but some of them are just even willing to tell me, and they'll walk up and go, now, Pastor, you wouldn't want to preach every week, but as far as coming to run things, you say, Pastor, what you need to do, and honestly, some of it's not bad advice, but what rises up in you when somebody who doesn't know about you, what is it that in you that goes, hey, you don't know me? What is that rises up in us? What is that? That's called arrogance. That's called pride when you think, hey, can't nobody tell me until they walked in my shoes. Can't nobody tell me. You know what that is? It's arrogance. That's pride. Moses, he's humble enough when his shepherd father-in-law looks at what he's doing and says, hey, this isn't good. Moses is humble. I mean, nobody's lining up to talk to Jethro. Moses is humble enough, he listens. And as unpractical as what his father-in-law says to him, it sounded to him probably as unpractical as it does to some of you, what I'm saying. He listens, and he hears the principle that many of us need to hear, and we need to get a picture that one day we can apply. Here's what Jethro said. You must be the people's representative. All he does is he listens, and he says, Moses, there are one or two things. I'm going to do the work for you, and I can tell you the one or two things you're really good at. You must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to him. Jethro just does the hard work and says, hey, there are only a couple of things you're really good at. Here's what one of them is. You need to be the person that takes the big disputes to God. And secondly, it's possible for you to teach people these laws. I know they don't know them. They've been slaves their whole life. It's possible you could teach people that and show them how to live and how to behave. Instead of you spending your life doing all of these things, there's only two that really make a major difference that only you can do, Moses. You need to focus on those two. And while Moses is thinking about that, he just says, look, those are your two. Those are your responsibility. Here's how we're going to implement. He says, but select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, Trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, appoint them as officials over thousands and hundreds and fifties and tens. Have them serve as judges for people at all times, but have them bring every difficult case to you. The simple cases they decide for themselves. That will make your load lighter because they will share it with you. You'll have margin, Moses, if you do this. If you do this and God so commands, you will be able to stand the strain, and all of these people will go home satisfied. See, that's the benefit of margin as we've been describing it. The pressure goes down. Moses, you will do less, and you'll accomplish way more. Moses listened to his father-in-law and did everything he said. Now, the final principle in this Under Pressure series is about work. To gain margin at work, and again, this is just a picture, this is just a bullseye for you. The main principle you need for margin at work is focus. You need focus. You need to do the hard work of figuring out what causes me to really excel. Once I've figured out what are the one or two things I am equipped to do, and then we work with those around us to marry what I do, and when I do it, I'm in my groove, and people know I'm good at it, and it moves the ball forward. When I can marry those things to the one or two things that someone in my position has to accomplish in our world, then productivity happens, my emotional margin goes up, I feel better about it, and I get more done. Another way to say it is, you play to your strengths and you delegate your weaknesses. You probably heard that. You play to your strength and you delegate your weaknesses. But if you don't do that, here's what you wind up doing. And some of us actually feel like this is what we should do. We sort of wing it in the area of our strengths because we're good at that. And we try to get better at our weaknesses. People give us things to do. We know we're not good at them, and we just wing it into things that we can do without really thinking about it. We just wing those things because we're already good at those. And we try to shore up and get stronger and work and learn and try to get better at things that don't give us any energy, that drain us when we try to do them, that we're not very good at them even still. And we add to our workload and our stress load and the pressure that we feel. We don't accomplish as much, and we just wing it in the things that we're really good at. And the best thing you could do for yourself, honestly, the best thing you could do for your organization, the company that you work for, the people who work with you, and those around you, is to figure out, what was I created to do that when I do it, I'm in my groove, and I do it, and then you can figure out, and you can't do this tomorrow, I get it, you don't own the company, or you own the company, but it's not big enough. You figure out, what am I really good at? What are the one or two things that are indispensable that only I can do? And I marry that to the job description that I do at work. Spiritually speaking, for those of our Christ followers, what you do is, I align myself in the major part of my life, the thing I do more in my life, which is work. I align myself with the way God, my Creator, made me. And I get more done with less pressure and when I have more done with less pressure, I have margin. Now, I just need to tell you, I have experienced this in my life. When I was in my early 20s, and you can't even imagine. I know some of you think I'm not anything like a pastor ought to be already, but imagine 30 years ago. Imagine I haven't been a Christian very long. Imagine I'm 2, 3, 4 years into this thing with Jesus, not much less ministry. And people have told me, hey, you ought to do this ministry thing, and I'm trying it. I'm trying to be a pastor. I'm trying to do all the things that a pastor needs to do. And I'm convinced I'm never going to be good at it. I'm never going to get good at all the things that make a person a pastor. And I'm working at a small church. I'm the only staff member, and people there expect me to do everything. I mean, I've got to print the bulletin. I got to figure out what's in the bulletin. I got to figure out what's going to happen in church. I got to pick curriculum for kids. I got to make sure we have teachers for kids. I got to train the teachers for kids. I got to make sure everybody's there. And if somebody gets sick, I got to go to the hospital and visit them. Now, if you want to know what I'm really not good at, I mean, empathy does not come naturally for me. It's not one of those things that I'm not exceptionally naturally empathetic. You cannot imagine how many hospital rooms nurses have asked me to leave because you're you're too loud, and you're upsetting the patient. And I mean, I have gone in and I'd get corrected, and then I'd go back and I'd try to do the pastor thing. I'd try to talk soft, and oh, God bless you, and it's so nice to see you today, and how I can do. And eventually I'd feel comfortable. I'd break loose. I'd be loud, and we'd be laughing, and nurses would come run me out. I'd go to the hospital, and I made people worse, not better. And I was trying to figure out how to do this, and I was ready to quit. And then I'd do things that I was good at, like leading and putting people in place and helping figure out people what was strategic. I'd stand up and speak, and people would hear me speak, and they'd say, man, I was really good. But I knew I could do better because I was working so hard on these things I was bad at. I was just winging it when it came to speaking. I was just winging it. I'd just get up and wing it, and people say, it is good, but I knew it could be better. And I wasn't getting any better, and I was frustrated. And then I heard a person teach this principle. And when I heard it, I was right where you were, because I couldn't implement it. I couldn't go out and hire anybody. I couldn't change what they expected out of a pastor at that church. But it became a bullseye on the target for me. And I convinced myself that eventually I'd get there. So that eventually when we started this church, and we were that little core group, and they were deciding what they wanted to do with me, and we want to start this church, I just said to them up front, look, and if you're looking for somebody that's going to be really empathetic and is going to go to the hospital and everybody's going to love you and feel better, I am not your guy. But if you want me to help lead a church where lost people can come and we can inspire lost people to find Jesus and Jesus can change their life, we can do this together. But y'all going to have to figure out how to do all that empathetic stuff together. I am no good at it. I need to do what I'm good at. I mean, and over time, it gave me emotional margin to do what I was good at, space to get better, and a church that actually surrounded me. Great leaders, great elders, great volunteers, that they did what they were good at, I did what I was good at, and God built a church. I mean, think of it this way. I can't juggle it all, but you've seen people that, I know people that they're pretty good at juggling 3 balls. But if you ask a guy who's good at juggling 3 balls, hey, can you juggle 5 balls? Well, if he tries to juggle 5 balls, you know how many balls he'll drop? The answer is not 2. He drops most of them. Because he doesn't have the focus for 5, and he just loses focus on all, and he drops most of them. But if you give him 3, he does fine. If you watch the guy who is able to juggle 3 balls, and you watched him trying to juggle 5, you know what you'd say to yourself? That guy can't juggle. But that's not true. He can juggle. He just can't juggle 5 balls. You give him 3, he's good. Guy like me, you give me 2, I'm a champion with 2. But you all have to do the hard work of figuring out, how am I created? Your goal at work, my goal at work. And I get you can't do this tomorrow. I get maybe you can't do it where you're currently at. I get your company, you haven't grown it to the place where you do it. I get that maybe even your current employment situation, you can't get to this. I am trained to paint a picture of you of what should be and could be where you could create margin at work. You know why you'll have margin if you decide to go this way? Because when you're working in your zone, when you're doing what you were created to do, you do it in less time, you do it with less stress. When you're working in your zone, you do it with less pressure, and you have more emotional margin to do the other things in your life, which is manage with the relationships, and you enjoy life more. So I want to talk to you, like we always do, about next steps. So if you grab one of these cards, it should be on a chair nearby. If you're sitting at one of our campuses and you may be sitting on it, would you take it and just go ahead and right here put your name and maybe a number where we could text you or an email address where we could contact you. And we ask everybody every week to do this, not because we just want to know you're here. We do want to know you're here, and we're so thankful if you're with us for the first time that you came to be a part of this. We're honored that you gave us this time. And we'd love to know you're here because we take time to pray for every one of these, and we'd like to pray for you. Whether or not you decide to do a next step or not, if you just give us your name and a way that we could contact you. We're not going to do anything weird. We want to say thanks for coming. We're not going to come to your house, and we want to pray for you specifically by name. Now, I'd like to challenge everybody to maybe turn it over to the back and to think about next steps in this area of finding margin at work. Here's what I want to ask you to think about. I want to ask you to think about taking the next step of maybe that first one that says, I will spend time answering the question, what defines success for a person in my position at work? I mean, this is what you've been asked to do. But what, not all the hundreds of things, but what are the one or two things that really define success for that position at work? Spend however long you need to figure out, in my position, what makes this position successful? Now, and if you can, the next time you have a few moments with your boss, just sit with your boss for a minute and say, hey, I've been working on something and I want your opinion on this. I want to try to do as good a job I can. And ask them that question. For my position, what are one or two things, if they're two non-negotiables, what are the two things that would make a success in this position? And ask them to write it down. My gut tells me they won't have the same answer that you do. What are the one or two balls that I can't let hit the floor? What are those two things? Once you get that, or if you already know it, well, then you're already up on this one. Then I want you to write the ideal job description for a person in those positions with those one or two things in mind. What that kind of thing, and you write one of those two things, how the mission of your organization would be better if these two things got accomplished. In other words, if I could do exactly what I'm gifted to do, here are the things I'm really good at, and here are the things that need to be accomplished. If I could marry those two things together, this would be my all-time ideal job description. The third thing is, once you have all of that down, you have a meeting with your employer. You have a meeting with your supervisor, and you say something like, again, this can't happen this week, it probably can't happen, it may not be even happen in this place. I'm trying to give you a bullseye on the target, and you have a meeting, you say, look, I want to see our company go forward. That's why I agreed to work here. I love what we do, and I want to see it go forward, and I want to be as productive as I can. I'm not giving you an ultimatum, but I've sort of figured out, from you and I talking, this is what you all need to do. Here's what I'm really good at. If you could help me over time move to this job description where I'm doing these things to accomplish this, that'd be helpful. I'm not giving you an ultimatum to do it this week or even this year, but if I could know that you and I are working together to move me to that position, I think I'll be better, I think the company will be better, and I know I'll accomplish a lot more. Now, most people, I can tell you that you can't do that today. Most of you won't be able to do that this year, but if you work for a reasonable employer, one that really cares about their company and what they're trying to do, they will appreciate your thought and your commitment and the work you've put into making yourself successful and them successful by the thought you've put into it. That's not something most of you can do today, but I'm asking you to check one of these next steps. We'll pray for you that you'll get this done as you move to find margin at work and the pressure goes down on your life. And you do less, and you enjoy it more, and you have more room for life and relationships, which is what the God who loves you wants. That's what I want to pray happens. So would you pray with me? God, I'm so thankful that in this world you gave us useful things to do, and that you built every one of us with abilities to do something, to accomplish something in this world. Father, often our work gets ground down to just doing stuff, and it feels tedious to us, and it feels overwhelming, and it feels like slavery. God, I just want to say how thankful I am that I get to work at a place where the people that oversee me, they care about what I'm good at and what this place needs, and they allow me to work in that area and lead in that area and do those things. Thank you for people that cared about you and the way you made me and what need is here. And we've been able to marry that. I pray for everybody that's joining in and listening, they do the hard work necessary to figure out what's the one or two things that God made me to do. And then you'd give them the courage to do all that's necessary to get to that place. Not today, maybe not this week, not even this year. They'd see it as a goal and the target, that they'd get aligned with the way you made them. And they'd find margin at work, and they'd live with less stress. Thank you for Jesus and the way he leads us. In his name I pray. Amen.